Month 1 with your baby, it's a very overwhelming time for parents, and you're going to be trying to figure out how often and for how long your baby should feed. Both you and your doctor are going to be looking at your baby very carefully to make sure that your baby is gaining weight. Now, when it comes to feedings, there basically are 2 theories about how often babies should be fed. One theory is called the on-demand theory of feeding, and the other is a theory of scheduled feeding. And I'm going to walk through these theories with you guys and tell you about what I did and what worked for me. And I've got my notes here because I want to make sure this is crystal clear, because this is crucial stuff, okay? Here we go. The on-demand theory, which is espoused by the AAP, the American Academy of Pediatrics, basically says that when your baby manifests signs of hunger, you're going to feed your baby. So what are these signs? Your baby might be rooting, which means going like this with his or her mouth and looking for the breast or looking for the bottle. Your baby might be chewing on his fist or chewing on his wrist, or your baby might be crying. So when your baby cries or manifests these other signs of hunger under the on-demand theory, you're going to feed your baby, okay? Now, what does the AAP say? They say on-demand feeding should occur and that babies should be fed for between 8 to 12 times every 24 hours during the first weeks of life, and that these feedings should range from 10 to 45 minutes in length. If your baby was born full term, you might want to consider something else, which is more of a scheduled feeding system during these early weeks, if your doctor is okay with this. And in fact, 4 of my 5 babies were borderline preemies, and I was able to establish some sort of a schedule for them. And I want to walk through this with you guys because it was very beneficial to me as a new mom. And here is what I did, okay? Now, I had a sense of when my first feeding of the day occurred. Maybe it was 7 a.m., maybe it was 8 a.m., but for our purposes here, I'm going to use the example of 7 a.m. When you start this 7 a.m. feeding, look at your watch and notice what time it is, okay? Feed your baby thoroughly. Give her at least 20 minutes on each side and make sure that she is full. You're going to be doing a lot of work to keep this little baby awake. You might have to change her diaper repeatedly. I once remember changing a baby's diaper 5 times to keep her awake. You're going to have to change her diaper. You might have to change her pajama. You might have to take off her pajama. I even had a friend who held her poor young baby in front of the air conditioner to keep her awake because it was so hard to keep that feeding going. But the basic point is you're going to do 20 minutes at least on each side, and you're going to do your very, very best to make sure you've done a full feed and that your baby is awake, your baby is rejecting the breast or the bottle, and doesn't want any more food. Around an hour and a half later, you're going to put your baby down to sleep in her crib in a nice, safe, tight swaddle. And no later than 3 hours after you began that first feed at 7 a.m., you are going to wake your baby up and you are going to start that second feed. It might be 3.5 hours for you, it might be 4 hours, but you get the basic point. By all means, if your baby wakes up earlier than your 3-hour mark, feed your baby. The idea to scheduled feeding is not to make the baby wait or starve the baby. If the baby wakes up hungry, feed your baby, and your schedule is not going to be perfect. You have to be flexible within your schedule. But the point is that you're going to aim to have this very consistent feeding schedule, making sure you have a full-fed baby who takes a good nap, who wakes up nice and hungry and feeds regularly and doesn't sleep for too long during the day, okay? So this is what your schedule might look like when you follow my little theory, which a lot of experts advise as well. 7 a.m., 10 a.m., 1 p.m., 4 p.m., 7 p.m., 10 p.m., 1 a.m., and 4 a.m. It looks pretty rigorous, and it's a hard thing to stick to, and it's exhausting, but if you do it well, you should get some pretty nice breaks while your baby's asleep. For preemie babies, I have another video on preemie babies, but again, if your doctor agrees with this, you might be able to establish some sort of a schedule of sorts. One last point that I want to make about all this stuff, whether it's on-demand or scheduled feeding, and again, check with your doctor, but this is something I think is really important. I don't think probably it's a good idea to let your baby sleep for super, super long stretches in her crib during the day. Because when this happens, you know that your baby's going to be up more at night wanting to feed, and you can really get into the situation where there's a reverse thing going on where the baby's up at night and sleeping during the day, and night and day start to become confused. So definitely check with your doctor, but in my view, whether you're feeding on demand or whether you're following the scheduled feeding theory, once your baby's been asleep for about 2 to 2.5 hours, I would wake that baby up and make sure she gets fed so that you can have a decent night.